Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Monday, July 14th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, checking in on Americans' immigration views, plus how states are scrambling for funds after Trump's cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, and what does Made in the USA really mean? Americans' views on immigration took a massive positive swing this year amid President Donald Trump's ongoing crackdown, according to new Gallup polling. The share of Americans who thought immigration should decrease, 55%, reached a 5-year high point in 2024. This year it has dropped to 30%, and positive views of immigration have hit a record high of 79%. The Trump administration ramped up its promise to carry out widespread deportations in June, sending out mass immigration agents to raid restaurants, farms, and hardware stores, and touching off widespread protests. He's also unveiled a new alligator Alcatraz detention facility for migrants in the Florida Everglades. His administration has also faced a slew of legal challenges. During former President Joe Biden's administration, Americans' views on immigration took a dip amid a surge of migration and reports of disarray on the southern border. States are scrambling for funds after President Trump's cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. I spoke with USA Today's senior national political correspondent Sarah D. Wire to learn more.
Thanks, as always, for joining me, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
So how must states now fit Medicaid and SNAP cuts into their budgets?
The bill passed by Congress and signed into law requires states to take on a greater share of the Medicaid costs, including administrative costs and hospital costs. And for the first time, it's going to require them to take on a percentage of the cost of food assistance, including SNAP.
And what else, Sarah, are states facing as the administration pushes off, a lot of these costs onto the states to help whittle down federal government spending?
They're seeing some really explicit things, such as the Medicaid and SNAP cuts. There's also some kind of more implicit things. For example, right around July 1st, the administration kind of quietly announced they weren't going to pay about a quarter of the money for some education costs. They just weren't going to pass it on to the states like they were supposed to. Same thing with FEMA. They're waiting a little bit longer to respond in hopes that the state can deal with some disasters themselves.
How heavily do states rely on federal funds in their budgets, Sarah? Do we have any numbers to kind of put this in context here?
About a third of most states' budgets come directly from the federal government. And so states are looking at these cuts and this, almost 1,000-page bill that just passed, and they're trying to figure out exactly what it does. Because the federal budget pays for everything from hospital stays to fixing potholes.
How much of this new responsibility can states actually take on? And what's the solution? I know we've heard about raising taxes, I guess, on the state level is one example.
I spoke to at least half a dozen local elected officials about what they were going to do, and they're kind of panicking. I've heard the word triage and tsunami, people talking about having to pit one vulnerable group against another. This is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars, and they don't have a lot of time because of how states budget. They're already working on the next fiscal year budget.
Sarah, did you speak with any state officials or lawmakers who defended the federal government's approach here?
The Tennessee House Speaker pointed back to when Tennessee had to make some cuts back in 2011. He said, he understands that when you have to try to balance a budget, you have to make tough decisions. He said, that the state's going to do what they have to do once they examine what the cuts are going to mean for them. But he said that he really understood that the federal government was going to have to make some hard choices, and the state was just going to have to deal with it.
Great story as always from you. Sarah, folks can find a link to the full version in today's show notes. Sarah D. Wire is USA Today's senior national political correspondent. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
President Trump said the U.S. will send Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine that will be reimbursed by the European Union. Trump did not specify how many weapon systems the United States would provide and told reporters it had not been agreed upon yet. He stressed that the U.S. would not pay for them. He then heaped criticism on Russian President Vladimir Putin, his latest in recent weeks.
We will send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening. So there's a little bit of a problem there, and I don't like it.
Trump made those comments while speaking with reporters at Joint Base Andrews yesterday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been pressing Trump to allow his country to purchase Patriot missile air defense systems from the United States as Russia intensifies its missile and drone attacks. Shipments of the missile systems that were previously approved were paused by a Pentagon review of U.S. military stockpiles and then resumed last week by Trump. Heavy rain and a new wave of flooding in central Texas yesterday prompted swift water rescues and hampered the grim search for victims of the flood that swept through the region more than a week ago, killing at least 132 people. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said water rescues were taking place in a number of counties amid this latest weather. The city of Kerrville posted video on social media of water rushing across streets yesterday. Kerrville was in the heart of the deadly flooding earlier this month. Meanwhile, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem yesterday defended FEMA's response to those floods, saying this is the fastest in years that resources were deployed to help in a natural disaster. Noem, appearing on NBC News' Meet the Press, denied that a memo she issued in June requiring her approval of all FEMA expenditures over $100,000 had slowed the agency's reaction to the tragedy. She also denied claims that FEMA call centers were not fully staffed. What does it mean to be made in the USA? The Federal Trade Commission is cracking down on deceptive claims. I spoke with USA Today Money reporter Bailey Schultz for more.
Thanks as always for hopping on, Bailey.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
See now, Bailey, folks see this tag, right, during purchases made in USA, but what does it actually mean?
What the FTC says is that a company must make, quote, all or virtually all, end quote, of its product in the U.S. to be considered made in the USA. So what does that mean? That could mean that final assembly or processing is in the U.S. That can mean all, quote, significant processing takes place in the U.S. And then products with all or virtually all components that are made or sourced in the U.S. can also qualify. And so when trying to figure out what that all means, I spoke to an expert who said it's sort of a flexible measure. So the FTC is taking into account all sorts of things like how much of the product's manufacturing costs are based in the U.S., how important foreign inputs are to the product. So they're kind of weighing all these different things. And then what she told me is that this is sort of determined on a case-by-case basis.
We mentioned the Federal Trade Commission. How has the FTC been cracking down on false or unsubstantiated marketing around Made in USA claims in recent years?
This year, we're really seeing the FTC kind of leaning into this messaging, going so far as to name July Made in USA month. Also this month, we saw them send out warning letters to a number of companies reminding them to comply with the rules. And as far as recent action, we've also seen the agencies are cracking down on a number of companies that they do find have been breaking the rules. So a couple of recent examples, 2023, Instant Brands, which manufactures Pyrex brand kitchen and home products, they were ordered to pay almost $130,000 fine after the FTC said that they made some false claims. Then we saw Williams-Sonoma last year, 2024. They were charged with a $3.2 million civil penalty, and that was the largest to date.
You mentioned like they're cracking down in particular this summer. And why so much focus this summer in this moment, Billy?
I did speak to experts about this, and the likely reason behind this is now because the FTC is working under the Trump administration, and we've really seen this push from the administration for an increase in U.S.-based manufacturing through tariffs. And so the sort of crackdown on false made in the U.S. claims really kind of aligns with this administration's goals.
So in terms of the consumers in this conversation, Bailey, do Americans actually prefer products made in the U.S.?
We do see that when Americans are surveyed and asked, do you prefer American made? A lot of times they say yes. There's one survey from Integris that I found, which is an IT service provider. And they found that about 3/4 of U.S. consumers say they really prefer American made goods.
And does that preference actually influence spending?
That's a little trickier, where same survey, nearly 2/3 of those consumers said that they actually weigh other factors like price, quality, more so in their purchasing decision than whether or not it comes from the U.S.
Folks can find this full story with a link in today's show notes. Bailey Schultz covers money for USA Today. Thanks, Bailey.
Thanks for having me.
Chelsea have won the FIFA Club World Cup. The English soccer team lifted the trophy yesterday after hammering French club PSG 3-0 in front of a massive crowd at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. You can read more from the game and the tournament over at USA Today Sports. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your pods. And if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.